The first time Captain Elias Wren saw her, she wasn't a warrior, a queen, or even the feared emissary of her people. She was simply standing on the edge of the docking bay, her silver-hued skin glowing faintly under the cold lights, her dark liquid eyes fixed on the swirling stars beyond the viewport. The official record called her Ambassador Sarai of the Veyari Dominion, but Elias thought she looked more like a prisoner. Her shoulders carried a quiet weight, her hands were always clasped together as if restraining herself, and she spoke rarely, always through the smooth, mechanical cadence of the translator node embedded in her collarbone. The alliance between humanity and the Veyari was fragile. Two civilizations circling each other after decades of mistrust. A single insult, a single misstep, could fracture the tenuous peace and send fleets burning across the void. That was why Elias, a decorated fleet officer, had been tasked with escorting Sarai during her brief stay aboard the human flagship Resolute. He followed his orders with the precision expected of a soldier. He stood guard outside her quarters, guided her through the corridors, explained human customs when she asked. And yet, beneath all the layers of protocol and diplomacy, Elias could see something: loneliness. It was in the way she hesitated before stepping into crowded mess halls. It was in the way she lingered by the viewport after diplomatic briefings, staring as though searching the stars for a familiar shape. Elias knew that look. He had seen it in young recruits, in men and women torn from their families by war. One evening, after a long day of negotiations, Elias made a small decision. He went to the ship's garden deck, a place most officers ignored. Artificial sunlight poured through the dome, feeding rows of earth flora, ferns, mosses, and delicate flowers carried from the homeworld as a symbol of what humanity sought to preserve. Among them, Elias plucked a single flower. It was nothing extraordinary, just a soft, pale blossom called a lunar lily, its petals glowing faintly under bioluminescent veins. On Earth, people often gave them as tokens of friendship or remembrance. For Elias, it was a small gesture, simple and harmless. He carried it carefully to Sarai's quarters. When she opened the door, her gaze fell on the flower cupped in his calloused hands. For a moment she said nothing, her black eyes widening, her entire posture shifting. Elias expected her to smile politely, or perhaps reject it as meaningless. Instead she froze. Then her breath shuddered out, sharp and uneven. "You, give this to me," the translator whispered in its mechanical voice, struggling to keep pace with the emotion rising in her throat. "Yes," Elias said carefully. "It's just a gift. A human custom. We give flowers to friends. I thought." He never finished the sentence. Sarai reached out with trembling fingers, touched the flower as though it might vanish, and then pulled her hand back as if burned. Her eyes were wet, though Veyari physiology wasn't supposed to allow tears. She whispered something in her own tongue, and the translator flickered uncertainly before producing a phrase Elias would never forget. "You offer me a vow." And with that everything changed. Middle. Elias soon learned that on Veyari worlds, flowers were not tokens of friendship. They were sacred. The Veyari had no flora of their own. Their homeworld was a desert scarred by ancient wars, sustained only by hardy lichens and water-blooming crystals. Flowers, to them, symbolized an impossible beauty, fragile life that could not exist in their harsh sunlit wastes. Long ago, when their ancestors discovered flowers on distant planets, they had woven them into their deepest traditions. A flower freely given was not decoration, it was a promise. A gift reserved only for one who held the giver's heart. By offering Sarai the lunar lily, Elias had unknowingly declared himself. First she avoided him. The next morning, her quarters remained sealed. She attended the alliance meetings with an expression even colder than before. And when Elias tried to apologize, she said nothing, only looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. But as the days passed, something shifted. One evening, Elias found her waiting in the garden deck. She stood among the ferns, her silver skin bathed in the fall sunlight, and in her hand she still held the lunar lily, carefully preserved in a containment field. "You do not know what you have done," she said quietly. "Among my people this is not small. It is binding, eternal. A flower is a vow to protect, to cherish, to never betray. It cannot be given lightly." Elias swallowed hard. "I didn't know. It was just a gesture." She silenced him with a glance. "And yet, I did not cast it aside." That night, she told him stories of her people, of the Veyari's great migration across starless gulfs, of the shattered moons they left behind, of how their hearts still longed for beauty that had been denied them. For the first time, Elias heard her laugh, a strange, lilting sound unshaped by the translator. The days turned into weeks, and the unexpected bond between them deepened. When Sarai walked the corridors, she no longer kept her head bowed. She asked questions about human customs, curious about things Elias had long taken for granted. Why children painted stars on their walls, why humans told stories of love across galaxies, why music could make a soldier weep. Elias found himself explaining, and in return she spoke of Veyari songs sung without words, of crystalline structures that resonated with their emotions, of a culture built on endurance and survival. But not everyone welcomed the change. Ambassador Coron, a rigid human diplomat, saw the growing closeness between Elias and Sarai as dangerous. "Our alliance rests on careful balance," he warned. "If the Veyari believe one of our captains has entangled himself with their ambassador, it could be misinterpreted as manipulation, or worse, as mockery of their traditions." Even Elias's commanding officer grew uneasy. "You've done enough, Ren. Escort her. Protect her. But keep your distance." Elias tried. But when Sarai looked at him with those black, searching eyes, distance was impossible. The test came sooner than either of them expected. A hostile faction within the alliance, human extremists who believed peace with aliens was betrayal, plotted to assassinate Sarai during her departure ceremony. The intelligence reached the Resolute too late. As Sarai prepared to board her shuttle, an explosion ripped through the docking bay. Elias's instincts took over. He shielded her with his body, dragging her into cover as shrapnel tore the air. Soldiers loyal to the extremists stormed in, rifles blazing. "Stay behind me," Elias shouted. But Sarai did not cower. She touched the lunar lily pinned inside her robe, her expression fierce. "Among my people," she whispered, "a vow is not only for the giver. It binds the receiver as well." And then, with a grace Elias had never seen, she moved. Energy crackled around her hands, Veyari bioconductive power, channeled through crystalline implants. She raised shimmering barriers, deflecting bolts of plasma. Together, she and Elias fought, human steel and alien light side by side, until the last of the attackers lay disarmed and defeated. When the smoke cleared, Sarai turned to Elias. The translator whispered her words, but her voice carried its own raw intensity. "You gave me a gift," she said. "Now I give you mine. My vow."